Hi, everyone. This is Alex Lindsay, and this is the Teardown, Episode 4. All right, we're going to start with what's called a package. So a package is basically you're going to use it in the newscast, and you're going to send someone out, and they're going to shoot a bunch of footage for you, and they're going to do a couple interviews, and they're going to bring it back, and they're going to cut it all down and put it in your news feed. And this is the front of a package, or it's not really the front, it's the middle of a package. And let's take a look and learn a couple things from what they're doing here. So here you got a guy, and he's walking along. Now he's going to show you something. Wait a minute. Let's go back here. So what happened here? There was no light. There was no light, and then there was a light. So they're gluing this together really well. So what they did is they have this guy walking back and forth, and they're gonna do one cover shot here that is him doing all the moves, and then they're gonna come back and they're gonna shoot all these close-ups. So these close-ups are shot separately, one at a time, well lit. And this is a great way to do this. And you can always tell the difference between an advanced, experienced videographer or documentary shooter and someone who's just getting started is that the person getting started is going to follow them around. It's going to all be shaky camera, and they're all going to try to walk closer and grab all the stuff. And there's a lot of movement here. What you'll notice is that this is just a really nice designed shot. He's not moving very much. He's moving a little bit, but he's not moving a lot. And that means that it's just a much more pleasing shot. It's a lot easier to follow along with what's actually happening. And then you just go back and do the inserts. Yes, it takes a little bit more, and it's not as authentic as if you just captured it all. But it's a much better show. So you should definitely take notes. Let's go on to the next thing. Nice setup here. Probably did that a lot. So this is just a nice ease in, nice ease out, all of those things to just create a nice frame. You'll see that, there's nothing you can do about, this peaking. This is what's going to happen with a digital frame. Now, if you shot this, I don't know how you'd shoot this bright, but there's ways to kind of pull some of that data back. If you were shooting in log, you might get some of it back, but you'd still have peaking. It's just too much of dynamic range, but it's a really nice frame in general. And it's quite nice to look at. Here you have a nice shot, and this is another example of an experienced videographer doing their job well. So what you see here is, watch the shadow there. So he's got a light that's coming here. This light is not part of the foundry. This is a foundry. It's not a shooting studio. So this is remarkably well lit for a foundry. They designed this. They probably practiced it a bunch of times. They figured out the frame. The only thing I would have done here with this frame that's a little different, and let's see if let's go back to here. The only thing I would have done a little differently is I don't think I would have included this stuff down here. I get that it's part of there, but I probably would have had this frame, in a little bit. I think this action, would be better over here, but that's the only change. It's well lit. It's nice. And then of course you set up another shot, you get it all set up, and then you cut it, and you try to cut it together in time so that it feels like it's all one shot and it all just happened. But of course each shot is set up, and it's set up well, I have to say. So here's another shot here. So he's got a light right here, right over here, off camera, going this direction, and that's nice. It's a nice shot. I don't think that's coming from again, I don't think it's coming from the foundry. I mean, there's a lot of really cheap lights up here, so I don't think that's the case. Now the other thing is probably this guy here. See this guy walking? He's going to walk through here. I think that he is most likely cued to do that, which is nice. You've created this nice open area, and you're creating a little context by having someone walking through it. I think it's a nice touch. It's well done. And again, I would say that the videographer and the producer and the folks that went on this, probably two, maybe three people, might have had an audio engineer there. I just think that they did a great job. It's great. And this is what drones were built for. You take a drone with you, you get an establishing shot, and I don't think anybody notices that it's running backwards, which I'm almost certain it is. So the ripples make it look like it's running backwards. So anyway, but it's a great shot, and that's exactly what you should use a drone for. And I think that anybody going out to do packages these days should definitely get a license to make sure that they can shoot this legally in whatever country they're in, because it's just great. All right, so here we have our host. He looks great. A couple things here. Nice soft background. Even the seam isn't that bad. It's soft. It's not as noticeable. Yes, I would have loved to move this over a little bit so you didn't have the seam in the frame, but it's not horrible. They are like Al Jazeera. They are protecting for the 4:3 standard def. Doesn't matter over here because you've got a ticker. I hate white. Just in case you're wondering, I hate white shirts. And the reason that white shirts don't work is because if you think about a waveform, let's see, 0 and 100. what happens in a waveform, and this is the dynamic range of your video image, is that shirt is going to be way up here, and his skin is going to be somewhere in here, and you can't move that skin up. You can't fully expose him because your shirt is going to peak. And so, an engineer won't want to peak that shirt, and so they're going to protect for it. And it's oftentimes, now he's not, his skin tone is pretty light. He can probably get away with it. But a lot of times, especially with darker skin tones, you end up with an issue where they look much darker than they have to because you're protecting for the white. So white isn't really not a great color for the shirts. This is a typical BBC pointing down. And it's a, I get the, they don't want to have plosives, but I don't feel like it sounds as good. I think you hear a lot of rustling that's coming down, from the papers and all those other kind of rustle and create a lot of noise. I don't like it. I also think that I would paint this. This drives me crazy when they, little glowy area there, a little shiny area. That's not necessary for a lav mic. I don't understand. And this sticks out too much. I would definitely pick at that. If someone that worked for me did that, they would get a little trouble. I always think that this needs to be really, really clean as I go through that. So it really bothers me when it sticks out. Great set. This is a little bit different than what we saw with the Al Jazeera set. So one of the things that you'll see here is that they've made a lot of decisions, and they've kind of decided they don't want to be as flexible. They want to make sure that it looks the way it looks. And so you can change the brightness of these, but you're not going to be able to move them around and have as much control as you had with the Al Jazeera set, but everything looks good. They've also made more decisions about where the cameras will be. So these cameras are still automated. You still got one guy probably controlling all of those, but they these are going to be on this arc. You can get softer moves this way if you want to have the cameras moving. It's going to look better typically than the PEDs that we saw earlier. So these are still PEDs there, but they're on these dolly tracks. And, they made decisions about where it's going to go. Now, they still have a lot going on this set. So he can have one up. There's probably maybe one more position over there. And also, this is a stand-up position. This is also a stand-up position. These monitors are not for him. There's a place for the people to stand. So that's another place to go. So they can throw to things. He can go over to those things. They can create a lot of looks. When you're building a studio, you kind of have to think about that. You have to think about where you're going to, where people are going to go. You not often do you want to use a studio only one certain way. And so this is a way to kind of keep it all going. Now, if you're doing, this is fine for broadcast, but if you're doing webcast, red is not your friend either because it doesn't compress well for H.264 or live. It tends to get really chunky. All right, let's move on. I love this, by the way. I just love this animation. It is just, I've seen it for years. I've watched it for years. And it's just a great animation. And it sounds really good with the sound. The boop, boop, and it all comes in, and it's all great. What's funny is that, actually, I think in this one, you don't actually hear the audio. There's like about a third of the time that the BBC runs this, you don't hear the audio. And I think it's just some kind of routing thing where they got the graphic from one place, and there's no way to route the audio to it. But I always miss it every time it's not there. Now, we love the BBC, but this is the technical term for what we're seeing here along these edges is a hot mess. This is horrible. This is a horrible key. So it was fine if you did this, a long time ago. 5 years ago, 10 years ago. That's a really good key. But look at this. There's all kinds of erosion that's going on in the foreground, and then this gray area. What you're seeing there is that's the unspill or the despill that is getting rid of the green. So you don't see the green, but you still see all the edges, especially over dark areas. You're going to see a lot of that. But even over a light area, you're seeing the erosion that goes through here just because it's not a very high quality camera or key that's producing that, or maybe a little bit of both. This is a nice graphic. I think that the look at this, the little drops. It's a really nice touch. Anyway, so it's a nice graphic. It comes in well, and it's just a nice design. I think it works really well. I think one of the strengths is it's a strong design. There's good white balance. There's good, there's a lot of white space that they're using. They have clear graphics. They're not trying to make it like super realistic or anything else. It's just nice and clear, and it's easy to read. I think it's a really well designed and it's well implemented. So here you have a time lapse, and I love time lapses. I use a lot of time lapses as glue. So usually when we're doing productions, I'll be throwing my even my iPhone, but sometimes a GoPro or some kind of camera. And I always want to just grab some time lapses because they're great glue for the show. If you don't have anywhere to go, you can go to a time lapse. Everybody loves a time lapse. So one of the things you'll see here is that there's a lot of motion blur that really gives it a sense of motion. I think it's a better look having some motion blur instead of just having it be really sharp. So it's a really artistic look. I love what they did here. There's two ways to do that. One is, of course, a long exposure for every frame. So you take each frame and you probably stop down and everything's in focus except for the things that are motion blurred. All of those things are great. I tend to use video. So I don't, in 4K video, and with a GoPro or my phone or whatever, and I capture that. And the reason that I use video is because then I have the power to come back in later and make those changes. And so I'll go into After Effects, use Echo or Time Echo or whatever, and basically blend all that together. Now, the rendering time is stunningly long. So it's not something you're going to turn around really quickly. But a lot of times, if you have the night before or whatever, you can let it render for 3, 4, 5 hours, and you're going to get this really nice look. And you have a lot of control over it. You can make it shorter, you can make it longer, and so on and so forth. And you're basically using all the frames between the intervals that you've established within the video. So if it's every 5 seconds that you want the interval to be, you've got a solid 300 frames if you're doing 60p between those, and you can use those as in-betweens, and you can get this really nice soft blend between all the motion depending on how fast you want it to go. I think it's a great effect. But either way, it's a good thing to do. All right, let's move forward. Now you can see the mess that is brewing here. Okay, look at this. This is just like, what the... Anyway, this is a common problem that you see in news briefings, and basically all the newscasters come in and they have their cameras there, and everybody brings in. This guy didn't even have a windscreen. He just threw that SM58 right up there. So anyway, they all have their own little mics that they like to use, and they all stick them in there, and they've got their little stands, and they put them all in there, and it just turns into a hot mess. And I hate that. So I'm a big fan, and there's some people that are watching this that are probably going to be very upset with me, but I think that you should just give a pool feed. So either just for the audio or for both. And so when I work with clients on the events, I will tend to say, we're going to put a couple mics up here, and they're going to look great, and then we're going to give them back to everybody. And we're going to invest in a really good mult box. A mult box is it's a little box that basically has a whole bunch of XLR outs. And so you send one signal in, and everybody can just tap onto it. The biggest problem with a mult box, by the way, is that you get a buzz. So that's something you have to pay attention to, is to make sure that it's grounded properly, and that you have, you're dealing with your circuits to make sure that doesn't happen. So that is that is your responsibility to make sure it sounds good. But at the same time, I will admit that when I'm running the event, I won't use the mult box myself. So I'll take an aux out of the mixer. But we give the press the mult box so they can get the audio that we're mixing. And that means we can get rid of all these. There's no mics over here, but you can get rid of all the mics here if you do that, or a lot of them. And maybe you have 1 or 2 broadcasters that have seniority that you let them put their mics up there, but you don't let everybody put all their stuff up here. It's just look at this. This is a big hot mess. So and I get there's a certain culture to it. Like we're coming in, we're hanging out, we're putting all this stuff up, but I think that culture needs to go away. And I'm not. I have to admit, when I'm running an event or I'm working on one of these events, all I'm worried about is making sure that my cameras and my sound good, because it's the event that I'm accountable for. And so the press there tends to be stanchions, there tends to be all kinds of things that kind of push them away. I don't share the riser with them. All those things are kind of things that I just kind of push out. So that I can make sure that what we have is great, and then we work to have routers with convenience spot panels and mult boxes to make sure they can get it what we're doing. So if they want something great, but usually they're not going to get a very good frame anyway. So anyway, there's a lot of people that I probably made really upset by saying all of that. We'll see what people do. I'll probably get a lot of down thumbs for that anyway. But that's some of the behind the scenes of what you see when you see this, is just this mess behind them. One of the things that I'm also not a big fan of is all the step and repeat. Once you decide you're going to have a camera or a couple cameras and everyone else is going to get a feed, you can design the background a lot more effectively. So you can do more of this and less of this. And so you don't need to have all of this stuff showing up 60 times. It's just yeah, I just think that step and repeats, make my eyes bleed. So anyway, it's just not a good design. I think that we got to move past that. As this is a very 80s, maybe 90s thing to do. I mean, it's been around for a long time, and I understand these guys, all of these guys paid good money, and they want to make sure that you see them in the thing. I just think we can make a design so it looks nicer. It doesn't have to look so ugly. Okay, that's it for the episode. If you like it, tell your friends, subscribe, all that fun stuff. If you don't like it, sorry.